Good morning and welcome to our talk show, Good Morning Greyhounds. I'm your host, Sydney Smith, and I am joined here today by lovely Mr. Derrick Jones. How are you today, Derrick?
I'm doing good. Today was a little bit busy, but I'm better now. So,
I'm glad to hear you're doing better. So Derrick, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so of course, I'm Derrick Jones. I went to Pike High School, so I'm a native to Indianapolis. And then I'm here at UIndy as a communications major and studying electronic media, and I actually just added journalism as another concentration. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So what got you into communication and journalism?
So what got me into communication and journalism, it's a funny story. So when I was younger, I always thought I wanted to do film and film directing. But then I realized, like, as a film director, you kind of have to do, basically put your own money into the films. So my goal is to, through like communications and news broadcasting, get that money and then do my own films and stuff.
For sure. So is the end goal to be a film director?
Potentially, yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay.
I do like news directing more now, and I'm kind of like, so what am I going to do? Am I going to stick with news broadcasting or not? But whatever the world takes me, as long as it has something to do with like television. So.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great route to go, and you're taking the right steps to do that so far. What do you think adding journalism onto your major will help benefit you with?
Basically, adding journalism on to my major will help me with my like writing skills, getting more depth into details. Because one thing I have learned as like for TV is good for capturing emotion and basically just showing people like what people are going through. And then journalism, it goes into the in-depth details. And me personally, I like details, like I'm really detail oriented. So not only do I like to like get people's emotions like on video, but if I can get more into detail, then I can help that way too.
For sure, yeah. And you recently attended a conference to better these skills.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So it was the inaugural National Traumatic Journalism Symposium, really long. And basically what it was basically talking about journalists dealing with PTSD in the field and then also bettering our writing skills. So basically it started off in this big, huge conference room at Franklin College. It was really nicely set up. Everyone was really welcoming. And the first thing they stated was like journalists are people too. Because like when it comes down to like journalism stuff, a lot of people think, oh, as a journalist, like your personal life and your journalist life is basically not compatible.
Sure.
And people just treat you like basically trash because you really like you're trying to like be human, but then at the same time like you kind of can't because you're trying to get all the facts and information so people know. And the biggest thing I learned from it is like when you're like interviewing sources or just doing your own job, you have to remember you are a person as well. So when it comes down to like interviewing people, don't push them to like get facts out of them or information out of them. Give them time to like process what has happened to them. Because a lot of the time it's traumatic events in television and journalism because either someone lost somebody or a major event happened, natural disasters, anything like that could have happened. And like people grieve. Like it's not like the event happened and it's just like, oh, I feel so much better now that it's over. Like people have lost family members, children, grandparents, anything like that. And I just feel like that was that's the smartest thing someone could have said to me. Because like I was told a while back that as a journalist I could not be emotional. I was just supposed to go in, get the information and leave. But at the symposium, they talked about being empathetic. So basically getting close to the sources, keeping in contact with them, everything like that. So that way you're able to like have their trust, because if they don't trust you, of course they're not going to give you the information. Of course they're not going to trust you to even share their story. So yeah.
For sure. So you mentioned that they told you to be a little bit more empathetic. Did they give you any tips or resources on how to do that when you're speaking to guests, possibly like on a show or something like that? They
said to be in tune with your emotions. So basically like if you feel like crying, there's nothing wrong with crying on television. That's what they had stated. Nothing wrong with crying at all, because if you're crying, that means that at least you're feeling some type of emotion. They said it's okay to have fear, happiness, as long as it's not anger, because like nobody wants to see
on television.
Yeah, no one wants to see an angry person on television. So that was what they said, just to trust your instincts, be in tune with your emotions, and not just be like emotionless. Because yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you said from the journalist's point of view what kind of things you should be feeling, but how should the outsider see this? So like, for example, somebody watching television and seeing a journalist being emotional, how should they react to that?
We really didn't talk about how the viewers will react to it, because being in the field is different from actually being a viewer. And I can testify to that because, like, me watching reporters, news anchors in the field, like as foreign correspondents, anything like that, I'm like, oh, well, they're out there, they're fine. Like, I didn't see anything like wrong with them being out there because I didn't think like anything wrong was happening. But when you're out there, you're like experiencing it, you're seeing everything wrong. And then like there's close calls too, so you don't know like if you'll come back or,
right.
And then actually take back what I said. There is some things where viewers could basically have emotion to it, especially with family members, because there was a guy named Nick Fitt, and he was a foreign correspondent, and basically he was reporting in the war in Ukraine, and basically multiple bombshells went off behind him.
Oh, wow.
And when that happened, he said after it had happened, he just stayed silent while it was happening, but after it happened, his mom had texted him saying, "You cannot leave the earth before I do."
That is so
and
sad. Yeah.
That it can be emotional for viewers to see someone that either they know or like they feel a personal connection to them, because like journalists are people too. I stand on that. So
I really like that point too, and I'm glad that was a key takeaway from you. Were there any other key takeaways from this event that you attended?
Yes. Again, well, the biggest thing that I took away from the event was to practice with your own trauma. A lot of the times, like when you're in the work field, you don't think about like your own personal trauma having any effect on you while you're like in the workplace. But basically, there was multiple journalists that stated like traumatic events that happened. They shared a traumatic event that was related to it, so they couldn't cover it. They talked about how in like news management, like we should be more trauma aware, and basically people should be like able to ask if they could not cover the story due to their own personal traumatic events. Me personally, I mean, I don't like boats because I had family members that had died in a duck boat accident back in 2018.
Yeah.
So I don't get along with boats. Like I can swim, but I'd rather not stay like in the deep, shallow water. So. Yeah, but basically we talked about like how you should check to see like what your triggers are, traumatic events that basically trigger you, and don't send anyone back and forth, back to back into a traumatic event. Like say it was like a school shooting, and then you send them to see like a hurricane disaster and there's dead bodies everywhere, anything like that, you shouldn't be happening. You should like try to like even the workload between everyone, so that way like it's not the same person, because that can be like a burnout and unmotivating for someone to constantly see like death around them as they're working. So
for sure, yes. And you mentioned maybe practicing your trauma in your journalism. What did you mean by that?
So basically what I meant was trying to find potential triggers that trigger you. The thing they said was try to like meditate and think about it. I tried it, and that was the thing that came up. The reason why I hate like swimming in deep, shallow waters is because of the accident that happened to my family members like in the past. And then also not only that, like there's sometimes, and this is personal, there's some moments and times where I'm like, did I choose the right field? Because like you never question it until like something either bad happens to you or like anything like that. So you really have to like dive deep into like your past, or just dive deep into like your thoughts to figure out what those potential triggers are.
Do you have any advice for people trying to dive into those thoughts?
Don't go in alone. Most definitely like talk to someone about it. That helped me most definitely. Like I find myself talking to a lot of people about like my problems, if I have any problems or things that come up that could be traumatic for me, because like when it came down to like questioning like whether I want to do it or not, it was because I was questioned by someone who is not on the campus, but basically I was questioned by someone who questioned my abilities in the field, and I felt terrible because I was like, wow, am I actually like even good at what I do? Like I hear other people say one thing, but it's the people you look up to are like you're expecting their approval, and they're just like no. Like no means no, of course. Like with people you get no's all the time, but I don't know, it was something for me about like having a no from someone I looked up to that really like dug deep, like cut a wound, like made a wound.
For sure, yeah.
So,
It's important to keep those in mind, especially when you're talking to journalists and people who have experienced trauma. We will talk more about this, though, after a short break. Be sure to stay tuned. We were talking right before the break about kinds of different things you can do whenever you reenact trauma journalism. So something that he mentioned to me over the break is moral injury? Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I could not remember. So would you mind explaining that a little bit more to me?
Yes, so moral injury is defined as either the corporation, workplace, or even people that you trust questioning your work or integrity. And I learned that from a foreign correspondent because he said that multiple times, and even throughout your career, that people will question if your basically story is reliable or even ethical. Because when it comes down to like finding trustworthy sources or anything like that, it's not like you're just going on the street and taking anyone's word. Like they do background checks, they do investigations on that person to make sure like what they're saying is true. So basically when it came down to moral injury, it's basically like when the company is like just questioning you like if you're good enough. And a lot of the times, like when you're in the workplace, of course you're going to get that question. But I guess it hurts the journalists more to like see that the company doesn't have their back or someone that they look up to does not have their back.
For sure, yes. As a journalist myself, I've experienced that with some coworkers and stuff. So do you have any tips of motivation, or how would you stay motivated if you were facing moral injury?
So a quote that I took from Rafael Sanchez, who works at WTHR 13, basically he said to remember why you write. Remember what your job is. And he said our job is to hold people accountable for their actions. Basically, the reason why we report, the reason why we basically share our information with the world is not only so people will know, but for those who did the wrong to know that they are held accountable, that we just didn't forget about the survivors of that incident. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of relating back to that, how would you stay motivated in times of trauma when you're reporting on that?
A tip that they gave me specifically was to find something that you like to do outside of just work. So yes, like a lot of the times, like I create my own videos, but just don't associate it to like your job as a journalist or anything like that. Find something that you like to do to relieve the stress. Either that's like hanging out with family, friends. I like to shoot my bow and arrow. I like to go bowling, play tennis.
Okay.
And if I'm feeling, I'll sit down and watch a movie by myself in my room, and I will just sit there and be like in the movie. Like that's how I relieve stress. So yeah, so they said to find a stress reliever, talk it out, anything like that to stay motivated. So that way, like you're not like constantly like feeling burned out or not motivated to continue on.
So when you are feeling those feelings of burnout, I know you've mentioned a couple. Do you have any from a work perspective? Like what could you do with your coworkers maybe to relieve that stress?
I say talking it out. I know I'm like talk it out.
Yes,
but,
no, it's important.
I think it's important that you have that communication amongst coworkers, because if you don't communicate, of course you're not going to know how each other feels, or like even how your boss feels about you, or vice versa. So basically communication is key in like anything, whether that's work, relationships, anything like that. So if you communicate, of course, like I think that's like a big thing that helps like relieve the stress, relieve the trauma, because then it's not even on your shoulders anymore. It's not on anyone's shoulders. You're just letting it out. So
it's a really freeing feeling, I bet. Yeah.
Yes, very freeing.
Absolutely. So did you have any other key takeaways from this seminar that you attended?
No. All that was the biggest thing, focusing on PTSD. So
yeah, absolutely. So speaking of PTSD, I guess we can go back a little bit to that. So you're a student, and as I'm sure you faced a lot of stresses. I know you've talked about some of your ways to relieve the stress, but how do you balance that stress with being a student, a journalist, everything that you do? Big question, I know.
Yeah, big question. I mean, finding balance between both school, work, everything, because like I work on campus, work a lot of hours, do schoolwork. Outside of that, I'm helping like my family with like affording money for like housing and everything like that. So I mean, it's just a lot of stress. Like college itself is stressful because you're dealing with homework on top of homework, and then something might come up in your schedule because like it's just adulting. So basically just like finding balance, I think is key. Like when you find that balance, you'll know, like it will feel like a weight, like you can fly basically. Like you'll feel like you're Superman.
I love that.
So yeah, once you find that balance, I say don't add anything more to your plate. Like if you add too much, of course you're gonna feel like heavy, you're gonna feel groggy when you wake up in the morning, you're gonna feel like you're not doing enough. But if you find that balance, just don't do too little if you feel like you're not doing too much. But don't go overboard and basically like kill yourself. So
yeah, I think that's super important to keep in mind as a college student and even beyond into the workplace. So here at UNDTV, which you are a part of, we kind of have that family atmosphere. How would that help you, do you think, like even in a workplace in the future, having that atmosphere?
It actually helps a lot. Whenever I'm tired or like exhausted, when I come into UNDTV's like workspace, I feel energized again. Like I feel like I belong, I feel happy. It's because like I feel welcomed. Like all around campus, yes, I feel welcome, but it's a different type of welcoming when there's people with the same aspirations and the people with the same like visions as you and who welcome you and enjoy you being around. That just makes you feel like amazing. So UNDTV, I think, has set a prime example of what you should do in a workplace. So yeah.
For sure. So we've mentioned kind of your other commitments in the university.
Yes.
So you also are in charge of National Broadcast Society?
Yes.
How do you take that kind of stuff into what you're in charge of there?
Okay, so what I would do in putting what I have said in charge of that, basically like if a student isn't able to make it, like of course ask why, and if it's like just ask them if they're okay. So my mission whenever I walk into a room, the reason why I ask how people are doing, because you never know what people are battling. So that's the reason why I ask people how they're doing. Are you okay?
Sweetest person ever. Sorry, continue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But yeah, that's why like you just ask people how you're doing. Like it doesn't have to be like a full-blown long conversation, but let that person know like you're there and that you care. That's my thing. And if you do that, like not just in the workplace, but anywhere, I'm pretty sure you'll get positive feedback when it comes down to people turning in work, people producing anything. So
yeah. Very kind of you. I love that. I think we need to implement that more everywhere, not just inside the classroom, not just inside the workplace, just everywhere in general. Do you have advice to people to start acting that way, or how would you recommend to be kinder to other people? Because I personally think you're a pro at this point after talking to you.
It takes practice.
Okay.
I would say it takes practice because like, of course, like random stranger. Of course, like not all the time you're going to want to talk to a random stranger because you don't know them. But it's putting yourself like out of the way. So my thing is like sometimes when I'm talking to people I don't know, I have to remind myself they're just like me. They are human too. It's not like they're going to like, when I go up to them, they're going to like, go away. If they do, give them their space again.
Right.
But like just asking them how they're doing, anything like that, just anything like that will help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Derrick, and thank you so much for all the inspiring advice. But that is all we have time for today here on Good Morning Greyhounds. So we hope you guys have a wonderful morning. Thank you for joining us.